Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Ariana Shannon, and I am the Director of Marketing here at SalesIntel. And you guys have joined us for SalesIntel and Ambition's event, Be a Better Sales Coach, How Data Can Give You an Edge. So you're already awesome because you're here, because we assume you care about your team. This is fantastic. This is great news. Throughout the webinar, if you guys have any questions, please put them into the Q&A or for the chat. I will be monitoring those throughout. If I can answer them, I will. If not, we'll get them to our amazing speakers, Frank and Mark, at the end of the session. Also, it is being recorded. So if you came in a little late, or if you want to go back and listen to the amazing conversations about work from home life, you can do so. So on that, I put it in your very capable hands, gentlemen, and take it away.
Thank you very much, Ariana, and it's great to be working here with Mark on Ambition. I'm Frank Frisbie. I'm the Sales Enablement Director here at SalesIntel, and this is what we're going to cover today. We want to talk about ensuring your reps are prioritizing the right deals at the right time. I know that there's a lot of things that we could be doing in a day, and there's a lot of things in the funnel. So how do we look at the right deals at the right time? We're also going to talk about, mostly Mark, but I have some experience in this too, creating regular competitions around those KPIs, again, to move those right deals at the right time forward in your pipeline. And then we're going to talk about methods of reviewing progress to plan, your formula that you have in your weekly one-on-ones with your team. So without further ado, let's get into this agenda.
Yeah, so let's talk about what we should be prioritizing. So again, my name is Mark McWatters. I'm the VP of Sales at Ambition. If you're not familiar with Ambition, it's coaching and gamification for metric-driven teams. We really focus on pairing the two concepts of accountability and encouragement. One without the other can fall flat, but when you have those two together, it can be really powerful. So these topics are near and dear to my heart, and glad to be here. I talk to a lot of folks about what they should be prioritizing in their sales funnel, and I certainly talk about that with my team all the time. And what we tend to think about first is this idea of your sales formula, like your sales process of how many calls it takes to get to a connect, to get to a meeting set, to meeting held, to opportunity. And when you have an understanding of that formula, you start to have an idea of what levers you can pull to accelerate the sales process. So what I focus on when I'm looking at my deals and thinking about what deals do I as a leader need to focus on, what deals do my reps need to prioritize, the first thing I look at is stage and funnel. My job is to make sure we hit our new net new revenue goals, right? And for us, annual contract value. And so we have a stage in our sales process called Champion's Choice. That means that we have someone who wants to buy Ambition, and they have told us they want to champion Ambition. Why is that important to me? It knows we have somebody on the other side trying to make this happen. So for my example, I look at that stage in the funnel as a critical stage for understanding what pipeline we can expect to forecast. So first I'm looking at that stage, and then I'm looking at stage age. That rhyme, I can't take any credit for it. It's the marketing folks, but actually I think Salesforce calls it age too. But anyhow, we're looking at how long that deal has been in that stage. And there can be red flags. Hey, if a deal in Champion's Choice shouldn't be there longer than 24 days, we should be notified, right? So I'm looking at stage, age, and then of course I'm paying attention to who's involved. If Frank is my buyer and I ask the sales rep, hey, have we discussed who's actually going to purchase this? And they're like, no, there's this guy, Frank, I haven't met him yet. Then I'm going to ask, how do we get Frank involved, right? So not just the buyer, it can be any number of roles, but you have to think about stakeholder involvement. Another key thing to look for here is if you only have one. If you only have one, that deal's at risk, right? What if that person leaves? What if they change jobs? There's a lot there. And then, of course, timeline. we run a quarterly business. So right now we're at the end of the quarter, right? We have less than a week left. And so what am I prioritizing? I'm prioritizing new deals that we can get done this quarter. So if you look at the stage funnel, the stage age, who's involved and when it's going to close, that can help a busy sales leader understand where they need to focus their time. And I think the same applies for an account executive, right? This is your later stage opportunities. This is what you can prioritize. This is where you might need your boss's help to continue the process.
That's great, Mark. Thank you. If everyone on this call isn't doing those things when looking at deals, write them into your plans now, because that could be where you're missing on the coaching side or missing deals in your funnel. I also wanted to talk about, a different way to look at right deals at the right time, a little bit earlier in the stage. If you manage a BDR team or an SDR team or an AE that is sourcing their own prospects, putting in the top of the funnel, I have two things on this slide, Ariana, if you could throw them up, that I think that you should be looking at. These are key data points. So intent data and buying signals is the first. And SalesIntel is one tool out there that can help show you intent data, but there's a lot of them. Are they searching for the services or products that you offer right now? Very early in the funnel, with every single company to call on, even if they fit your ICP, this will help narrow it down. They're getting signals. You're getting signals now that they are intending to do something. And then the other thing, if you use any sorts of tools like Outreach or Sales Loft or to get those buying signals, are they opening your emails? Are they clicking on the links? Are you working with marketing to see who is downloading white papers or attending webinars, right? These are all signals that there is interest there. So at the very top of the funnel. And then one thing I thought of when I was preparing for this was my days back in the day selling copiers, door to door, carrying a bunch of brochures around and a very heavy laptop. I don't know why both, but that's the way it was back in the day. When you sold copiers, and maybe some of you still do, document management services, things like that, those things happen on leases, right? 4 or 5 year leases. If it's like cars nowadays, maybe it's 7, 8, 9 year leases. I don't know, but that's another way to hold those accounts over to the side. Don't prioritize them on now. There's no timestamp on that buying motive, but you should be recording that so that you know when to engage with those deals at the top of your funnel, at the right time.
Frank, if I can add to that just real
Yeah,
quick,
please.
this is such a miss by a lot of companies, especially early companies, and I have made this mistake, so it should be noted that I'm guilty as well. And that you spray and pray, right? You think everybody is your ideal customer because, like in Ambition's example, oh, you have a sales team, then you must be a great fit for Ambition.
Right.
The reality is that's not true, and so there is more and less in the simplification of who is the right customer. And if you're not sure, go look at your current customers. Even if you're in sales or sales development, ask your customer success team. Like, they know who's happy, who's having success. And when you can find more of the right types of companies, your message will resonate. Your SDRs will set better meetings. Your close rates will increase. Your deal size will typically increase. All by doing less and focusing on that ideal customer profile. So I'm always really aware of the people who are just starting, because I've been there and I know it feels like, where do I start? Defining that ideal customer profile can be huge. And to the points that you made, there are ways for you to understand who is looking for your service. And that is much warmer than you cold dialing in to someone that has no clue who you are, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
love it.
Good points all around. So let's talk about some fun stuff now. And by fun, I mean gamification. And Mark's going to take most of this slide, but I wanted to start it. I have way too many years of sales leadership experience than I care to share on this call because it'll age me. But And I've made mistakes on making games and contests, and I've had a budget and try to motivate people and move those needles. And the number one mistake that I've made is creating contest or games around things that your team are already paid for in their comp plan. So I'm going to tell you right here, don't do that. Don't ever do that. That's the reason you have a comp plan. If you need to create contests around it, then you need to go back and look at your comp plan and see if we're compensating people on the right things. But don't be boring. Don't create contests around, your revenue goals and things like that. And I'll leave it at there. And I'm going to let Mark tell us
it's so true.
all
It's
the
so
other
true.
things.
Like if you think about compensation, like as a house, this analogy I'm making up on the fly, like the comp plan is the foundation, right? Like it should be motivating the right behaviors that make for a healthy, profitable business. But when you think about running competitions, and Ambition has certainly gotten famous in this area. We started now 7 years ago as fantasy football for salespeople. So if that tells you anything of like the core of what we do, we're huge believers in, and there is a healthy level of competition. Like if we can be the Peloton for your sales team, that is a net positive. And so competitions isn't just about running one type of competition. It's really about how do you give your salespeople real-time visibility into if they're hitting their goals, not only versus their peers, Mark versus Frank, but also Mark versus yesterday, or Mark versus last month or last quarter. There's a way to automate and incent people to do more of the right behavior that doesn't actually involve a prize at the end. Now, I do love the actual competitions. And so we get a lot of questions to our customer success team of like, what kind of competition should we run? What is most successful? And the first thing that we will always encourage you to think about is, are you running a competition around a KPI that matters? And you might think like, well, Mark, why would people run a competition around things that don't matter? Trust me, it happens way too often. Like
I've
if
done it
you're
in the
running,
past. Yep.
yes, so have I. Like, let's run a call competition when like connect rates are terrible. I'm not sure that call competition is going to give you what you need, right? And so think about the KPI that's really important to you. Maybe it's meeting set for a sales development team. Okay, well, let's run a competition around meeting set. Perhaps you do reward some of the activities that get you to meeting set, but you heavily reward the meeting that gets set, right? And so make sure it's around a KPI that matters, that if you talk to your sales team, that they believe it matters. To your point, don't make it the close one revenue number. Make it a really important behavior that leads to that. The champion's choice example I gave you earlier could be a good one. So think about what's important in your funnel. Where can you point a contest to drive the behavior that drives that point of the funnel? Oftentimes, these are the less sexy metrics, right? The ones that when you're working from home, you're like, do I really have to do that? The answer is yes, it's critically important to how you build future pipeline. Outbounding is maybe the most common thing that gets focused here. But you also want to think about long-term versus short-term. If you only run the 1 hour call blitz, that has impact. There is value to that, but are you really changing a behavior there? And let's be honest, the same person probably wins, right?
And will it have an impact on the company's month or yeah?
Right. Yes, exactly. So you got the same person winning. Does it really have an impact? Well, while there's value in the short-term spiff, what I always point out is make sure you think about a team-based competition over a longer period of time. So uh, let's imagine you run a quarter-long competition around a really important KPI, and you make it team-based. Why make it team-based versus individual? If Frank is an A player and Mark is a C player, all of a sudden Frank cares a lot more about Mark's performance. Frank is going to be an A player whether this competition exists or not. But will Frank be the A player that's trying to help the C player? This competition motivates that moving of the middle, a topic I certainly love. But how do you focus on the middle 70% of your team and inch them further? your top player is going to be your top player. Let's get in the middle, right? How do we drive as a leader the middle part of the business? So there's beauty in the short-term spiff. There's a lot in the long-term team-based competition. But the foremost piece of this is just make sure you're incentivizing a behavior, a metric, a KPI that really matters to the business. And if you're doing it just on closed won revenue, I'd argue there's probably a gap in your comp plan. Like the comp plan should cover the closed won part, use these competitions to drive the pipeline.
Great point. Great point. All right, Mark, why don't you take the first half of this one? Now we're getting into, some of these big ideas we've talked about, but now we're talking about weekly one-on-ones with your team members, how to use some of this information. So, Mark, why don't you take the first half?
Yeah, this really ties it all together. Gamification can be really powerful. Competitions can be very powerful when used right, like we just discussed. But bringing this all full circle and creating the positive accountability around the encouragement that gamification provides is where you really start to see a sustainable lift in the behavior change. So here at Ambition, we run weekly one-on-ones. Same time each week with each person on my team. Those one-on-ones become a critical piece of how I drive new initiatives within my team. Like think about sales managers out there. You're crazy busy. Your salespeople hopefully are crazy busy. Managing change and communicating change is a difficult process. Like I remember being the sales rep that would see the thing go off in Slack and kind of ignore it because I had so many other things happening, right? And so you have to think about your weekly one-on-one as a way to drive those initiatives. And the way you make sure that the one-on-one conversation is effective is you ensure that you have the KPIs important to the role inside of that one-on-one. And you also want to make sure that you're coaching around the right questions. And the right questions is not a one template for all people. Like current state, I mentioned Champions Choice Pipeline. That's a big initiative of mine. How do we drive that revenue to closed won? So what does the one-on-one look like at Ambition? I have the amount of dollars in Champions Choice Pipeline. They pick one deal in that Champions Choice Pipeline scheduled to close this quarter that we discuss. There's a question around what do you like about the deal? What are you concerned with about the deal? And how can I help you in the deal? Right. So what we're doing is we're creating a dialogue around an initiative that I have, that the rep has. We are working together to ensure we're on the same page and what right looks like. But also we have the KPIs that support the conversation. And it's all documented. It's easy for me to go back and look and see what did we talk about last week. And hey, maybe Frank and I are in a coaching session and I create an action item for Frank based on what we agree to in the coaching conversation as an outcome. Well, I can create that action item and then we come to the following week and that's where we start the coaching conversation. So sales coaching, there are so many misses. Again, I'm not saying I've been perfect here. There are definitely days where pre-ambition where I struggle with this, but the one I always point out is the drive-by. If Frank's my boss and we meet every Monday at 2:30, probably every Monday at 2:15, Frank's like, "Hey Mark, I don't have anything to talk about. You good? I'm good. Like, let me give you that 30 minutes back." I mean, if you've ever been in an office and been in sales, that happens all the time. The reality is there's a miss around developing that person that is not
Absolutely.
a huge time investment if you do it the right way and you use some automation to help you.
Yeah.
So by making sure the coaching conversation happens, making sure it's documented around the right topics, making sure KPIs are part of the coaching conversation, and having the ability to create time-bound action items off of the coaching conversation, that's how it really starts to get powerful and where you start to see a lift and a move in the behavior change, the initiative that you're driving.
Absolutely. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, Mark mentioned being consistent. And it's consistency in holding yourself as a leader accountable to that time. I'm sure everybody on here has had a boss too. And when your boss says, "Hey, I don't need to meet if you don't," sometimes you're like, "Ooh, okay, I could go do other things." But as the leader, you should be forcing that and making sure that happens for sure. And then I would, Mark laid out what he does. He's very consistent in what he does. The point is not to write down exactly what Mark does, but that's a good point. But to make sure those meetings are consistent, it helps people. It helps people with anxiety over that meeting if you know exactly what to expect every Monday at 2:30. One of the ones I used to use with my team was keep, stop, start. You may be familiar with it, but every week I wanted to know what are you going to keep doing after we review numbers and we have some of these key KPIs, whether it's pipeline or activity or whatever, that you're hitting. What are you going to keep doing? Tell me something you're going to stop doing. Maybe it's using filler words on your voicemails. Maybe, it could be something small, but tell me something you're going to stop, and then tell me something that you're going to start doing. These don't have to be huge, but then when you go back the next week, because you've written it down, you've shared it with the employee. And by the way, a Google Doc that as a leader, you have the right to edit and the employee does not, is a good way to give them access to this is what we've discussed. If they want to change it or they don't agree with it, you can always go in and edit it. But it's sitting right there. They can reference it all week. What did I say I was going to stop doing? What did I say I was going to start doing? And then we could go back to that week and say, how did it go on those 3 points? And if your team members come up with something that you don't think is great, point them in the right direction based on, again, the data and what you're measuring, what you want them to focus on for that week.
Frank, you made me think about something that so previous life, I used to work in employee engagement data. We used to do a lot of exit interviews at this company called Work Institute. Great company. If you need something like that, there's your shameless plug for them. I hope they're watching. Anyways, the number one reason for leaving several years in a row was career development. And I think about the coaching one-on-one as the avenue as a sales leader to make sure that is part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And so being able to, if you never have your one-on-one with your manager, like, does that salesperson feel developed? Probably not, right? Like they think Mark doesn't care about the development. They just care if I close the money. And so it just presents an avenue when you do it consistently. Of course, you're going to stay on the revenue. You're going to stay on the initiatives. You're going to ensure that you're closing business. But are you also ensuring that your salesperson knows you're committed to their development and what's important to them, perhaps outside of just how much money did I close? Hey, I'm a mid-market salesperson. I really want to work enterprise deals in my next role. What's different in the enterprise sale, and how can I get access to know what that looks like, right? As a good
Right. And
example.
what are some things you could start doing in your current role, right? Do the job before you get the job, where you can say, all right, well, let's start working in this piece and that piece. Yep.
Yep. And it's, I know every company isn't, as open as I probably think they should be, but like in that example, I'm going, okay, well, let's pair up an enterprise seller and the mid-market seller and have the mid-market seller ride along on a couple deals that they're not going to get any commission off of, but they at least get to see the process. And what buyer, what champion, what you pick it role is upset when you say, hey, Frank's actually going to ride along with me. He's really interested in enterprise sales. So I thought this would be a good deal for him to observe. They're all going to say, oh, great. Like the nice part about, especially on the sales side of things, is like sales leaders get it. Right. And
Yeah.
so anyway, create development opportunities. The one-on-one coaching conversation is a great place to make sure there's a space provided for those types of conversations.
Yeah. And as we go on to questions, just kind of tying it all up, right? Those career development things, they're super important. And really, it's trying to quantify all this. What we're talking about is measuring like the right things to make sure they're focused on the right deals at the right time. And so, in those one-on-ones, if you pick the things like moving from stage 2 to 3 in your funnel is the thing that's going to help this person the most, then is that moving in the right direction based on these things that you're coaching them to do? All right, I think that's all we had as far as death by PowerPoint, and we made sure we didn't make it 50 slides long. And now we just wanted to open up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please just throw them in the chat, and we will go in and look at this.
Thanks, Frank. We already have one that's been sitting there for a little bit. I'll go ahead and pop that one up first. So Mark, you said that you look at sales stage and stage age to set priorities for what you work on. Is stage age a positive or negative indicator, or is it the same for all stages?
Yeah, great question. Bill, thank you for sending this in. I see it here. Okay, so it's a positive and a negative indicator, because if you have a benchmark set and it passes the benchmark, meaning it's aged longer than it should, it's obviously a negative indicator. If it's less, then that's a positive indicator. And to answer your question around like same for all stages, it'd be a crazy coincidence for it to be the same at each stage. So think about maybe you have 6 or 7 stages in the sales process. Most likely all of those are going to look different. For example, a meeting set to a qualified opportunity is going to look very different from a qualified opportunity to whatever your next stage looks like in most situations. So days are going to be different. I also saw it come in here on how do you know where to set the benchmark? Okay, I'm going to use a Salesforce example, although I assume each CRM gives you this kind of access. So forgive me if so in Salesforce, I can go in and pull a report of all my opportunities. And they have a standard field, which you can pick from in the report, that is age. When you use that field, that's how you can monitor the age of the deal. You can also assign the same, now that's for the overall deal. You can also assign an age per stage, and that's how you're able to go in and look at sales qualified opportunity, X amount of age. But where do you set the benchmark, Bill? Is you go pull your existing data. You look at deals that closed won and deals that closed lost. You probably separate these out. But for the deals that we closed won, here was the average time in each stage from 2020. In 2020, also the deals that we closed lost, boy, we noticed in that second and third stage, it got a lot longer, and that's probably where the deal died. So to set your benchmark, go pull your existing data. I'd say go look at all of last year. For some people, last year was a little bit of an anomaly. Maybe you go back to 2019 too, but that's where you pull it from.
Yeah, and I'll add, one thing I'll look at with this is I'll look at all of it for an average, but then I'll also look at our who has the lowest stage age in this metric, and go talk to them, go shadow them, go figure out if there's some thing or two that they're doing to shorten that cycle. You may be able to take your average and set your team a goal that's a little shorter, because now you're going to go into that behavior, that talk track, those questions they're asking, whatever it is, that pricing positioning, and you're going to train your team on how to do that so you can start to shrink that stage age down a little bit. So yes, look at the average, but also could you set your benchmark a little higher? Because now I know how to take these people that have a huge long, stage age in that stage and shorten it up.
Great points all around. Next question that we have in through Q&A. What's the typical stage level for champions?
For us, it is our third stage. I don't know if that's going to be consistent though across the businesses, but I'll tell you why it's our third. Typically, we have a meeting set. Off of that meeting, we're going to understand some basic qualification criteria to move it to our level 2. Typically, there is a longer term or just a longer meeting, could be a demo, could be any number of things here. But in that process, we are able to uncover if there's someone who wants ambition. And sometimes that's a former user that left one company, went to another. Great folks to contact. Other times it's competitive, and we just ask the question, hey, Frank, candidly, where do we stack up? And you're like, oh, we like ambition. Great. So when we get that confirmation, that's how we move the stage.
That's a great question. I see Joe has one here, a very specific market. He works for a machine builder. They sell capital equipment. He says, we're always trying to be sure we don't miss smaller prospects, but focus on multinational, larger players. Missing a sales means it's likely 2 years to have another opportunity there. So I'm trying to incentivize our team to spread a wider net, looking for good ideas and advice. Okay, well, Joe, I would say I assume that the prospects that you have right now, you have a value associated with them from very early on, whether you've talked to the company or not, that you have an idea of, what size of project they're going to run. And so you're saying your funnel is probably too heavy on the big deals and not enough of these smaller ones. I think what we're talking about here is having a healthy funnel, right? So if your goal is $10,000 a month and you have one deal for 10,000, you're going to make or break on that, right? But if you have 10 deals for 1,000, you might not get to the 10. So I've used actually a worksheet that has elephants, zebras, and squirrels on it. And I've had the team say, you need to be working in 1 elephant, you need to be working 4 zebras, and you need to be working 9 squirrels. And we figured out what that was. It's a way to almost make it like kindergarten and a little fun, but that bigger deal is going to take longer. The smaller ones should pop sooner. And you're basically looking at the health of the funnel there. Salesforce or other CRMs, you should be able to create a opportunity value category so that all those deals fall in there so that you can look at it more cleanly and not use my silly kindergarten worksheet. But then you would want to just talk to that in your one-on-one, say, hey, look, you're working a lot of these big things. Let's go find some smaller ones. Don't stop working the big ones, but the next ones, let's find some smaller ones, some quick wins so that we don't lose out on those 2 years.
All right, we've got another question pop through. As a freight brokerage, my team works independently. How can gamification work in a siloed environment?
Yeah, I just saw this one come through, Kenneth. It's actually one of our most popular industries for customers. The reason being that freight brokers typically know that sales process. They understand how many loads they need to book, at what margin, how many calls it takes to get to a load, how many contacts they need in their list to call on. I'm kind of like jumping around there. But when you have the sales formula in place, it's a pretty transactional environment. There's a lot of hustle required for that job to go well as a freight broker. So being able to give that like Peloton-like atmosphere for freight brokers can be really powerful, where they know where they stand at all times versus their goal. They know what they need to do more of. They know if Frank's beating them. A lot of power in that. It's almost like Wolf of Wall Street feeling on the sales floor. Using that gamification can be pretty significant results.
I haven't thought about that movie in a long time, Mark. It's a crazy sales movie.
Yeah.
I don't have anything after the hour. I know that we're about 2 minutes past. Do you guys have hard stops? Because we can keep going as long as people have questions.
I unfortunately
do?
do. But I am on LinkedIn. I think there aren't many Mark McWatters out there. Search me, find me. Also, my email address is here. So if anybody has personal questions, I'm happy to answer them one off.
Yep. Same with me. And I misspelled my own name on the last slide. So, but that's another story. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll tell you about the invention of the Frisbie and why I'm not rich from it. So thank you guys all for joining. Super helpful. Great questions. And hope to connect with you and help you in any way possible.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a wonderful afternoon. Let's go close some deals.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.